Cindy in Iowa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, please. Girl, you're on with Bob Chapman.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Joyce.
Hi there.
I have a question. You say that it's best to get out of everything. I've been out of work for a year. I have some money in a 403B, and I can get it out now because of being without work.
Okay, quickly, because we're out of time.
Without a penalty, and I'm wondering if I should go ahead and take it out and
Bob, your response.
Yes, the answer is yes, and email me, bob@intforecaster.com.
Bob at intforecaster.com.
INTFORECAST.
We'll be back in 3 minutes. Stay tuned.
Well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster as we look and see what's really going on behind the scenes financially. Now, of course, President Obama tells us he wants to keep people back to work. The solution is to get jobs here in America, and that's why, of course, we gave all that money to General Motors, and General Motors is supposedly doing so well. They've called a lot of workers back, but the workers are there producing something called the Volt, a $41,000 car with batteries up the middle, so you could get a middle seat there in the back of the car, and it sort of squeezes down on the sides of the seats there, but you can only get 4 people in this car for $41,000. And, of course, how many people are buying a Volt when you can get a Japanese car much, much less, at that $25,000 if you want an electric car. So they're producing them. But will they sell? Well, this is the government's decision. They're going to produce them whether they sell or not. And, of course, they've opened all sorts of new plants, but most of them have been over in China or India. We've given them 60 or 50 or $60 billion. And I think we gave them something like $65 billion. They paid us back $6 billion. They say, see how wonderful things are. Look at all the money General Motors is making because of what the government did. But is General Motors really doing that well, do you think, Bob?
When they paid it back, they borrowed the money.
They borrowed the money to pay it back.
From the government.
Right.
They took it out of one pocket and put it in the other. And, it's so typical of criminals. And Washington and New York are run by criminal syndicates. And that's the Brotherhood of Darkness. And you're right about what they're doing. And I see Ford is going to come out with an SUV, I guess, in a year or so, which will be on the lines of the Toyota capacity, mileage, horsepower, and so on. And Americans, I don't know that they're going to buy them.
Well, I certainly wouldn't buy a Volt for $41,000. That's for sure.
No, you can buy an SUV from Ford, which is the Explorer, new, for around $32,000. And if you buy one in the year changeover, you can buy it for $24,000. And that's pretty good because the car should last easily for 200,000 miles if you're interested in keeping it that long.
But, of course, the thing that really bothers me is, of course, they're trying to get everybody into electric cars, but they're raising the price of electricity. All of the new so-called smart meters are going in, happy to charge more money. Nobody's ever complained that the price of electricity dropped when they put in a smart motor. It all goes up. And so then, of course, when you're going to be charging your car, who's going to pay for the electricity? Why, you are. You're paying extra to get an electric car. You're going to pay extra for electricity. And as they raise the price further and further, because they really want to raise the price. That's why they're effectively blocking nuclear power, very, very cheap electricity. That's why they're blocking hydroelectric power. In fact, they're tearing down dams all across America. If you don't believe it, go up and look on the Internet. They're tearing down, dams where you get electricity for, I think, a penny a kilowatt, something like that. They want to raise the prices, but they're not going to tell the American people that, are they, Bob?
No, they're not. And were they to ever pass a cap and trade bill or a carbon tax, then the effect on electricity would be brutal.
Well, hold that thought. We're going to be back in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, they're going to raise the price of electricity. That's part of the plan. This is Dr. Stan. Bob was just talking about the transaction tax in Washington, D.C. Of course, they're talking about, first of all, seizing the private pension funds and giving people a guaranteed government annuity, guaranteed by the full faith and the stability of the American government, which is technically bankrupt, with a national debt of $13 trillion and a real debt of $60 to $70 trillion. They'll never be able to repay, and they'll never be able to pay the guaranteed annuities either. And then Bob's talking about the fact that they're talking about a transaction tax. So every time you put money in the bank, they'll tax you 1%. And then, of course, when you take it out, they'll tax you 1%. Bob, that's going to discourage people from putting their money in the bank. They'll hide it in their mattress rather than have to put out 2% because they're only going to get maybe 1% interest on it. Why put your money in the bank when you only get 1% interest? It's going to cost you 1% to get it in and out.
Well, I expect if they do that, a tremendous black market will spring up all over the country, and the preferred investment, the only real currency in the world, will be gold and silver. And that's what's going to happen. No matter which way you go on all this stuff, everything heads toward investments in gold and silver bullion and coins and shares. And there's no two ways about it. And, you know, some people say, well, the Illuminists, the Brotherhood of Darkness, owns most of the gold in the world. That is untrue. Now, how does anybody know what they own? Nobody does know. And I hear people spouting this garbage out all the time. And I think a conservative estimate of what these people might have is anywhere between 15 and 30% of the world gold above ground that they have invested in. Now, that is a substantial amount. There's no question about it. But there is no other alternative. I hear people speaking about having a currency, U.S. notes, doing away with the Fed, and that's all good. But you've got to have something backing the currency. Every time we have a fiat currency, it goes down in flames, no matter which way you configure it. You've got to have gold and silver backing any successful currency.
I agree with you totally, and I think that we're just going to see the progressive erosion of the value of our currency. But right now, the inflation is not that bad. But this is because the present time, the Federal Reserve is paying the banks not to lend money. They're putting the reserves, with the Federal Reserve now has $1 trillion of money that could be being lent out. Instead of that, the banks are putting it with the Federal Reserve. If, of course, if the banks started to lend that $1 trillion, it would become $10 trillion, and that would be highly inflationary. So they're really caught between a rock and a hard place, aren't they? If they let the banks lend the money, they get inflation. If they don't let the banks lend money, we get deflation. What are they going to do?
Well, I think a very simple answer to that would be to tell the banks, look, you can, what we're going to do is we're not going to pay you that 2.5% on the money we lent you at 0% anymore, because we want you to lend the money that you have. Now, we have decided that you can lend out an absolute minimum of $500 billion, and if you want, $1 trillion if you want. And we have to get the economy back going, and you got to start making loans to small and medium-sized companies that hire 70% of the people who are employed in the country. And so I think that's what they're going to do. And that's the secret weapon of how they're going to inject trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy. My guess is $5 trillion over the next 2 years, and that should carry the economy through the next election. It should bring unemployment down from 22 3/8 to 20%, because they're not going to have the results they had in the first two stimulus kind of programs. I mean, the last one, 3 to 3.5%. They just changed all the figures going back 3 years to justify what they're doing. I mean, everything is just a simple, unpurgated lie. And so what's going to happen is the QE, which would be QE2 now.
You're talking about quantitative easing, which really means expanding the monetary supply. Go ahead.
And it's very inflationary. And inflation is somewhere between 7 and 8% right now. The government says there isn't any. You know, I've had that tune before, you know. And so I think that's where it's all headed. They have to.
Well,
they either increase it or the whole world goes under. And if they're ready for that, that's fine.
Well, Chris,
that's why you want to be in gold.
You're saying that if they want to destroy the whole world economy, they'll continue doing what they're doing. If they don't want to destroy the world economy, they'll begin putting more money in. Now, do you think that they'll simply create the money out of nothing, as they have in the past? Or do you think that they'll actually get the banks, the small banks, encourage them to go ahead and lend out, maybe instead of a ratio of 10 to 1 to a ratio of 5 to 1? Is this what you're suggesting?